Welcome guys again to the third video in our series to build a water tracker app. So in the first video, we saw how to design everything in the app. In the second video, we saw how to add water amounts to the global state, and we can see the number here changing because we're reading from the global state. And now it's time to build this cute little page, which is the history of the water intakes. So let's say a user did drink, I don't know, 5 times a day, and he recorded those 5 entries. Maybe there is one that was recorded by mistake, so the user want to delete that entry, or the user just want to see when did he drink water in that day. So now we're gonna make this screen work. So the first step is I want to just connect this page to that page. So I want that when the user click on this icon, it will take him or her to the screen where the history are shown. So let's do that. So to do this, simply select the icon and then add a wrapper of gesture detector to the icon. Then let's click on OnTap function to modify that. And here I want to use the navigator object. Now you can find it by searching for it, or you can simply just go under. Now I can see this menu. So I want to go to that screen, which what's the name of that screen? Empty. Let's just modify the name. So I want to call the screen today. Let's say today history. And then let's go again to the icon here and to the navigator, and then so the type here, the type of the navigation. So push will simply go to the second screen and then keep the first screen in the route, which means that when you click on back, you can go back to the older screen. Push replacement, it will remove the current screen from the route. So this means that there's no coming back, there's no back. And this is, for example, when you support sign in, for example. Now we don't need to talk more about that, but let's just now choose push, and we will have a more detailed discussion about the navigator in upcoming videos or in the documentation. So now we need to go to the other screen, which called today history. Yes. Okay. So now we click on play. If we click on the button, now we go to the second one. Okay. Now the second step is we need to modify this placeholder to make it actually show the number and the time of when the user did drink water at that moment. Let's open this component in its own preview. So when we click on this button, we can have a focus view on that component. Now, if you click on code, you can see the source code of that component. And here, when you click on water log, you can modify the design of that component. So this placeholder, it's a job to show the information taken from a single water entry. So what does that mean is I need to create a parameter, and this parameter will be called logEntry, and this parameter will be from the type water logEntry, which we created in the last video. So as a reminder, water logEntry is an object that holds a single entry, and it has the amount that the user did drink at that moment and the time. So because I will pass entry or a single object, this component in the list, then I need to extract all those information from that parameter, which is from the type water logEntry. Now if we select this parameter, we can even set a default value for it, which means that when I don't pass a logEntry to that component, what should this parameter be, or the value of this parameter be? Now I have inside a logEntry, I already have a default value. If I click on delete, then it means there is no default value for this parameter. Let's now start by creating a default value for this parameter. And we need to create a default value for now so we can test here, are we displaying the correct data in the parameter from inside? So we need to create a default value to test that. So now I have here the amount, which is 0. So let's just choose 100 just for testing. And then in the date, let's create an object for the date. And let's choose an hour, let's say 13, and let's say minute, which is 50. So again, those are data for the default value for the logEntry, just for us to connect the parameter to the UI. But then in the end, it doesn't matter what you put here because those data will come later when the user actually input that he did drink an amount of water at a specific moment. So now let's connect the information here to the parameter. First of all, I will connect the text here. So instead of having a fixed value, again, we're going to go and create a custom expression. Oh no, first of all, let's just go to locals so we can find here the log entry, and then we can get the amount, and then we can convert it to string. So now this is the 100, which is the default value that we entered here. But as we did in the last video, and I think now you already know, we can have a custom expression where we can add milliliter next to it. Click on evaluate, and now we're good. By the way, another way to input expressions, not just by going to custom expressions, but you can also go to expression and build one without doing the freestyle of writing it. So for example, for this one, we already said that this is like a math expression because we're adding the 100 to the milliliter. And the type is string because we're adding two strings together. The left side is the log entry, the amount of water inside the log entry, and the right side is milliliter. So you can do this by the pop-up, or you can simply write it down inside the custom expression and it will convert it, the pop-up when you click on it here. But of course, if you want to modify it as a custom expression, you can click on custom expression and you can write it down. And evaluate will check that what you wrote is a valid expression or not. Amazing. Now let's talk about the time. So now we want to connect the time as well to the object. So now let's go to the text property. First of all, I'm just going to try to show the hour. So I'm going to go to the locals, click on logEntry, and then click on date, which is from the type DateTime, as we can see here. And here we can see a lot of options inside that object. But we can see that I can see the month, or the year, or the day, or the hour, or the minute, or of course also the second of that specific time. Now what I care about in this case is the hour and the minute. So first of all, I'm going to choose the hour, and then I'm going to convert it to string. So 13 here, as you remember, is the number we did enter here as a default value. So now it's connected. But I don't want to only see the hour. I also want to see the minute. So what I need to do in this case is to go and write a custom expression. So when you connect already the text field to a value and then you click on the custom expression, you already can see the expression that was already built for you, which is that we are accessing the log entry, and then we're going for the date, and then we're going for the hour, and then we convert it to string. Now, I want to do the same thing, but for the minute, and then I want to add them together to show them in the same time. So I will have this here, and then I'm going to click on plus, and then I want to add the minute. So I will just copy the same expression here, but instead of hour, I'm just going to write minute. Then click on evaluate. Now it shows that there's no problem. Now, how did I know about the minute thing? Because when you go to the log entry, you can see here the hour and the minute. So you have to write it down exactly as written here. So now I can see the hour and I can see the minute and I can see separator between them. So all great. Okay, now I want to work on the delete functionality, which means when the user wants to delete this entry, how can the user do that? So if we select the icon here, we wanted to make it clickable, so we will add gesture detector, as you already know. But the thing is, I cannot add function here. I cannot click on plus and add functionality because I need to pass the function from outside to this component, because I will use this component here in the list. And in the list, I will know exactly what objects I have. Here I can pass the elements for those components, and then I can delete them. So what I need to do is I can't implement the function inside. I'm going to postpone implementation of the function to make it from the outside, which means that I will make this a parameter. So click on OnTap and then click on create param. So what does this do is now you have a parameter here, and this parameter from the type function. So what this means is, like, when you want to use this component from outside, you need to pass a log entry object, and you need to pass the functionality of the delete of that entry. That's why I made it as a parameter to make the implementation of the function outside this component. So here I'm going to change the name to call it delete callback. And this is in development called callback. It means that a function that you will call from inside the component, but the implementation of the function will happen outside. So you're going to pass a function from outside to inside, and then it will be executed when the user click on the delete button. If you don't understand now everything, it's completely okay. You will understand later when we connect this in the rest. Now we can see a small problem here. And this small problem is very important. So it says that the default value for the optional parameter logEntry must be a constant expression. So what does that mean? Is that I created a default value of this object. But the problem is that if the object or the type of the object, which is the water logEntry, is not constant. So what are the constant values? Like an integer, like a string, those things are constants. Now, when you have an object like water logEntry, this object can be constant if the underneath values are constant. Like the amount is integer, so it's constant. But the DateTime is not constant. So this makes the whole object not constant. Which means in general that when this happens, you're not allowed to create a default value inside the parameter for that function. So you have to delete the default value. So to connect this with the code, if you go to the code, you can see here that we are creating this default value and we're doing this inside the constructor. And this is like a constant constructor, which is the widget itself. And you're not allowed to create a non-constant object inside the constant constructor. If you're a developer, you'll understand this. So this is exactly the same thing. So what I need to do is simply, anyway, you don't need the default value here because you will pass the value from outside, from the list. But we made this here only to just be sure that we're connecting the properties inside the components to the right values. So what should I do now? Now what I simply need to do is I need to delete the default value. But if I did this, we're gonna have a lot of mess. So why is that? Because now we are trying to get values from a null object because logEntry has no data. So now we connected some properties inside the component with data that don't exist anymore, which will create this error. So what we need to do is we need to modify the expressions to let them handle when they cannot find the value they're looking for. So let's just now again create the default value of the object. So we will create the default value again. We will input the amount again. We will also again create the DateTime here. But what we will do at this moment is we will gonna make it handle when the parameter is null. So inside the text here, we can see here this mark, which means null assertion, which means that if logEntry is null, all of this will be invalid. And since we already saw that when we deleted the default value, all this expression became invalid. So we only need to do a very simple trick, which convert this expression to a conditional expression. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if, or not if actually, if we're going to say logEntry doesn't equal null, then give me this value. I'm going to put this inside brackets. Otherwise, give me something else. We're like amount not found. So what did we do here? We converted this expression from an expression that returns just a string, which is the amount plus the milliliter, to something called conditional expression. Conditional expression is a long expression that starts with a condition. We say here, if the logEntry is not null, then execute this expression, which is the same as the older expression. But if the logEntry is null, this is the part where when the condition is false, then execute this expression, which means give me an amount not found. Now, the text here is a string. So to expect an expression that returns a string. Let's click and evaluate. So, okay. So now we're going to do the same thing for the time. So click on custom expression. Now we have this expression, which is going to return a string. But again, this crashes when the logEntry is null. So we will do the same thing. So we're going to say here, if logEntry doesn't equal null, then put everything inside the brackets. So it means like if the log entry is not null, then this will be the expression to show. Otherwise, tell me time not found. Evaluate. Okay, so now if we went to the log entry object and if we deleted the default value, we're going to see amount not found, time not found, instead of having this exception that we saw before. Great. So now, since we deleted the default value, now we should be fine. Okay, now let's go to the first port. Now let's connect this list to the list of the water index. So to give us a little reminder, let's go to the water state again. Remember, we created in the last video a list of water log entry called today's logs. And here we are storing the logs when the user drinks water and he said that he didn't drink this specific amount of water, because we want to store the amount and want to store the time. So this is the list that we need to show now here. If you select the list here, for example, and you look on the right, you can see item count 3. So you can see, okay, what's going to happen if we have 5 items? What's going to happen if we have 7 items? So you can see all of that. But it's not connected to an actual list. So now in the list view, as we already saw before, we have the builder type, we have the normal type. Now we're going to go with the builder type, since the builder type is more efficient and it's usually the best one when we want to connect it to a list. So here I need to click on connect to connect it to the list. And the list is inside the water state and it's today's logs. So now it's connected to the today's logs. Now you can see still 3 items just as a placeholder here inside the designer, but if you click on play, you will see it's empty because for now there is no item inside the list. So now what we're gonna do? So now we connected the list to the today's logs inside the global state, which is the water state. When we connect the list, we can see underneath the list view there's a new value under locals called element. So for anything that goes below the list view, now the element is the single item from the list for that specific placeholder. So for example, this list view is now connected to the today's logs. And today's logs might be, let's say, a list of 3 objects of the water log entry. Now here underneath the list view, for example, in this placeholder, to deal with a single object, this will be inside the element. And the element is the single log entry object from the list. And as we did before, we created a parameter called logEntry for the component, and this logEntry will be used by the component to extract the data of the time and the amount. So what we need to do now is we need to pass the element from the locals here, which is from the water log entry, to the parameter we created for the component. So when I click on element, now I'm passing it. So what's now happening is that the list view is connected to the list itself that has multiple water log entries. And then underneath, I'm passing a single water log entry for every placeholder in the list. So each one is holding the information of a single entry. And we're passing this through the parameter. So now if we click on play, and let's say we go to the list, now it's empty. Let's go back. If we added 100, if we go to the list, now we can see that we added 100 milliliter at that specific time. Let's add 300 and then 500 and go to the history, and we can see the history. And because in the last video we insert the object in index 0, the latest water log entry added will be displayed in the beginning of the list. If we're using add, then the order of the list will be simply reversed. Now, the thing is, if I go back, I cannot delete an item. So let's do that. So now, as we did before, we did a parameter called delete callback. So here I can pass the function that will be sent for every component to delete that item from the list. But now we can do the function here, but actually the best practice is, since this function, it will do 2 things. It will delete the item from the list, from the today's logs, and it will subtract the amount from the today water intake to show the total, to subtract the amount was deleted from the total amount that the user drank at that day. Now, since we are dealing with the variables in the water state, it's always good practice to also keep the function here. So to keep everything organized and clean, we will do the function here. But anyway, we can even do the function from outside from the designer here. But I will do the function inside and call it from outside. So I will create a function here called deleteEntry. And what this function will do here is I will get the item that I should delete. So I'm going to create a parameter called item. And this parameter will be from the type WaterLogEntry. And I'm going to just delete that from the list. So I will go to the list under locals, which is today's logs. And here I will call remove. So this will remove an item from the list. What is the item I want to remove from the list? Is the item I'm passing to the function, which is called item. So here the value is item. And item is the object that I will send to this function. Now, after I remove it from the list, I want to subtract the today water intake to make it less because I already removed a single entry. So I will go again to local and get the today water intake. And then I want to set a new value for this today water intake. And the new value, I'm going to go to custom expression because the new value will be the old value, which is, again, today water intake. Of course, be sure that you're writing it exactly as the name because it's case sensitive. So the capitals and the small letters should match. So the expression will be today water intake minus item dot amount. So what is that? Item is the item I'm passing to the function. The item from the type WaterLogEntry. The WaterLogEntry object has a field called amount, which is the amount of that exact entry. So here I'm setting the today water intake and I'm making its new value equal to the old value minus the amount that was deleted from that item. So I just go by item.amount to access the amount of that item that was deleted and subtract that from the total today water intake that I already have. Now, after I did all of this, what I'm going to do is notify listeners so I update the UI. If I don't do that and I just deleted the amount from the today water intake, if I click on back and go to the home screen, the number will not get updated. It will only show the older one. So it's so important to call notify listeners when you are changing on values that are used in the UI. So I'm using today water intake in the UI, so every time I change it, I need to call notify listeners. Okay, so now what I need to do in the end, when I go to the board, when I click on here in the placeholder, in delete callback, I will just call that function that I just created. So I will go to globals, to the water state, and then here I'm going to call the function deleteEntry. And since that function has a parameter called item, which is what is the item that you want to delete, as we already explained before, anything underneath the ListView has an extra local variable called element, which is the element passed to that single placeholder. And we can also use that inside the circuit. So here the item will be again the element. And you can see here that the element is from the type WaterLogEntry. The item here is from the type WaterLogEntry, so they are from the same type. So now I will pass the element. So this means that to wrap it up, for every placeholder here inside the ListView, I'm passing the element, which is a single entry from the list, to that component, so it uses the data inside to render the amount and the time. And I'm also passing a different function for every item. And this function, what it does, it just calls deleteEntry function from the water state, and it passes that single element. So here I'm passing a function that's different from this one, that's different from this one, and each function I'm passing to the placeholder has a function that will delete that same element from the list. So let's now click on play. So now we can go to the log entry. We have no information. And then if we add, let's say 100, and then we add 200, now here it's 300. If we go to the list, I can see that I added 100 and then 200, but then I can delete the 200. And then when I go back, I will see this is updated. So let's say I want to add 300, 500, and then 200. Go to the list. I have this list now. and then I can, let's say, delete the 500 only, go back. Now this is 600, which is what's left. Go back again, delete the 300, and now when I go back, I will see 300, which is what's left. Amazing. This was the second part of the video. In the next part, we will continue on the app, like setting the bottom navigation bar, setting the goal, modifying the expressions here, fixing the animations here, saving and loading the data in the shared pref, which is a local storage, and in the end, adding notification for the reminder. Thank you for watching, guys, and we're going to get back to you very soon.